Hello and welcome to this exclusive conversation with an incredibly talented actor. In the business since a young age, he's starred in some of my favorite TV shows of all time, but he's also turned his hand to some directing, with his latest project being called Only in Theatres. But here in the Mass Effect community, you'll know him as the voice of one of the most iconic Bioware characters of all time, Kaidan Alenko, Mr. Raphael Sbarge. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome aboard, Shepard.
My first question was, how did you get into voice acting?
You know, voice acting when I started was really a way in which we would continue as actors to try and make a living and keep going, right? I mean, we as artists and as people who obviously work as freelancers, you never know when the next job is coming. So obviously looking for ways to be able to continue to sort of bring it in is really what it was about. And I was really lucky enough to be kind of start doing this at a time when some of these really remarkable games just sort of started to take flight. Some of the early games that I did were really very rudimentary in a way that the tech was still kind of almost like stick figures, and there were things that were kind of trying to kind of find their way. But what happened was these games, really just sort of came along, and I, I sort of did it the old-fashioned way. I auditioned for them. We know since the game kind of landed that obviously these games, they've surpassed the rest of the entertainment industry, right? I mean, they have become kind of the very top of the food chain, as it were, the very top of kind of the artistic output by these studios is astounding, and their following is in the gajillions of people who really are dedicated and devoted and really that think of these not just as games but really as life experiences. These are profound, passionate communities, and there are things and places in them that get touched by these games. Again, specifically, I think because of the genius of Bioware and the writing. The writing is or was at the time brought more women into gaming than any other game at that point. Which was prior to that it was a lot of shooter games. Kind of really much more sort of targeted at a male audience.
Yes! More explosives! You just made my day, advisor.
This was an idea that really was about, creating characters that had, in a way, recreating performances that felt more like, I remember when we were working on it, trying to find kind of what the style was, working with the director who was sort of really helping us find a way in which we could create kind of a military etiquette and or a way in which we spoke that felt right for this piece. But really, what she kept saying was, we want it more like an episode of 24 or a film. This is not a character, and this is not something just to be screamed. This is really has more subtlety and more in a way more elegance to it, and that was very appealing. And at the time, of course, was kind of sort of, I think, shocking and remarkable. It was sort of unusual. It really stood out against kind of the field from which it started, and I began in the theater. I've done lots and lots of training in the theater, and I think video games really do play to actors who really have that background. That's my opinion. I'm certain there's lots and lots of wonderful actors who haven't had it and have done just fine, thank you. But in terms of kind of where my grounding, and a whole bunch of the other actors that I know that were part of this have a sense of being able to sort of build a character out of very little. When you do a video game, you're really creating it completely out of your imagination. There you are, essentially, as you both are, sitting in front of a microphone, except you're in a lonely room with a guy or a woman behind lots of big thick glass and padded rooms, and you have the lines, and you are really in many cases not even reacting to anyone. There's no, they don't have. I mean, as we evolved, what happened was that Bioware was able to kind of figure out kind of a proprietary program that was really about. They were able to, if the other actor had recorded the lines in the scene, they could actually feed them to you in real time, and you could actually then respond, which is fantastic.
I hate that guy. Nihilus gave you a compliment, so you hate him.
But more often than not, and for years, that was not the case. You really were kind of really dealing with, your, connecting into what was happening and or trying to understand the story. Sometimes, at the very beginning, there would be an enormous amount of time dedicated to explaining every iteration of what's going on, and it, as you know, these are vast universes, right? And these characters have huge. So being able to kind of explain, sequences sometimes could become laborsome. But as we got more and more kind of into it, there was an understanding of kind of who the Sith were and what various characters were and what they meant to us, and of course, in my case, the relationship with the commander. Commander Shepard was so important, and that evolved some more, and then grew. This, really, to me, there's enormous artistry in every aspect of this, but to me, the writing was really kind of the cornerstone of what made this game so special.
I was going to actually ask you about that. I mean, being in a booth, it must be quite lonely, just there without all the other actors, comparing that to when you're actually in film or on the theater where you're reacting and you're bouncing off other people. Does it make voice acting that much harder because you don't have that interaction?
It's not lonely per se, but it's, when you record, more often than not, it's a 4-hour block of time, right? And it's just you, talking and engaging for 4 straight hours. And by the end of it, you're just exhausted. You just can't, you're sick of your own voice, and you're tired, deep tired, because, you're doing it over and over again. And you're trying to also kind of just sort of find it and kind of get to the center of it. What I love it, though, by virtue of the fact of the precision that you can do, and you're not encumbered by sets and cameras and props and things that are kind of earthbound. You are really kind of, acting is, in many ways, an imaginative art, right? I mean, you really are sort of you're using the depth and the breadth and the fullness of your imagination and bringing that to the storytelling, right? And when it's just you and a microphone, which, like a camera, basically has the uncanny ability to kind of see or hear the truth, right? When you're connected and you're really telling that story, and it means something. And again, it's you and who you're talking to. It can get there's something actually quite majestic about just doing it with a microphone. It's just different, I guess, in a way. I mean, I obviously love working with other actors. I like being on stage or on film, and that the camaraderie of that. This is you and the engineer, eating lunch and hanging out and talking, and that's kind of it. There is something wonderful about the camaraderie, right, of a cast or at least anyway, someone to kind of play a scene with. But there is absolutely something exciting in the way in which this kind of work actually challenges an actor and gives us an opportunity to kind of get to something else.
I suppose there's something quite like profound as well when like both voice actors, both you and whoever you're hearing the voice play back to, whoever you're bouncing back and forth with, like when you're both just giving it your all, like then there must be something like that just I'm like you're saying about like the imagination and stuff that's involved with that. Like there must be something truly different about like how just it's something subtle, like just hearing a voice, but it's like reading a book, isn't it? There's
Yeah. I mean, like when you're like, here's a simple example. So maybe you're in your car and you put on your favorite piece of music and it just kind of like, it just somehow, it just fills everything up. And then suddenly you're driving and you feel like, the wind is blowing and you're seeing all these images and suddenly you feel like you're in a movie, and there's this kind of an amazing sense of kind of connectedness to the moment. What happens is that we lay down the voices, and then all these other tracks get laid down on top of that. That is the effects, and then the design, that is the landscape of where we're in, the foreground, the background, audio landscapes. They're very exciting in terms of what they can do, and the spatial relationships that can be created in an audio mix, and then you have, obviously the sounds of the weapons and the running, which is, called Foley in films. I'm not sure what it's called in video games, but basically, the tactile elements of when someone touches a piece of cloth, or, all of that stuff, which creates intimacy in the sound, again, the oral landscape, right? And then you add on top of that the music, and then maybe explosions the town over, and and I don't know, like all of this then is what it's like layered, and it creates this world, and it's that's what's very exciting about kind of this, again, people, how we've been able to kind of take this, again, all of these folks working together in tandem. That's the visual artists, and then the music, and then again the sound design. It creates this amazing emotional impact. As you're doing it, it's pretty, it's like, I don't know, it's bare in its kind of simplicity, but as it's built, it becomes something really special.
It was near the end of the Jedi Civil War, when it seemed like we were going to lose everything. We met on a Republic warship called the Endar Spire.
How did you approach voicing Kaidan Alenko? Was there any aspects of his character that you found most compelling, or was it just something that you just kind of read the lines, or did you actually get into the character?
No, for sure. The character. I mean, the interesting thing is that we're cast because there's a vocal quality that feels right. There's something about what's in our voice that matches the story that the creators wanted to tell. So already, in a certain sense, there's some sort of a person that shows up, right, with who you are, which we can't run from, which is who you are. That somehow seems to sync up with the story that they want to tell with this character. So that's kind of a given. There's not a lot of research one can do with something like this. I was able to kind of look at a lot of the drawings and early designs of what he looked like, what his armor was like, what technically, one of the things that Ginny McSwain was the director, by the way, of 1 and 2 that we worked with, and Ginny would talk a lot about being able to kind of create a sense of kind of I think a distance, so that I think as I remember, she put kind of a piece of paper or something, or tape across the room, which was kind of a distance to speak to, so that we're speaking, yes, Commander. That there was a clarity to that. It wasn't a mumble. That it again, it had a kind of this sense of military presentation that really was given by distance, and the distance was really provided by the technicality of how much space was between us. But the things that I connected to with Kaden were his sense of loyalty, his sense of strength, but caring.
I can see you won't listen to reason.
You show up after 2 years and tell me you're working with Cerberus. What does reason figure into any of this? You've changed, but I still know where my loyalties lie. I'm an Alliance soldier. Always will be.
There's a sort of almost like a deep sense of kind of, I want to say morality in a way, although obviously he'd kill someone if he needed to, right? But there was a deep sense of doing the right thing about him. He's a good guy. He's a, he's not a decent fellow. I'm not, probably these aren't enough words. It means something to me, but there was something deep within Kaden that felt like he was one of the good guys. Definitely someone you'd want to have, as your mate, and or someone you'd want to kind of go to battle with. He was reliable. He did what he said he was going to do. He, showed up when he said he was going to do. He didn't have a lot of sort of squirrely ulterior motives. He was, he's just, a solid wingman, and in some ways deeply feeling, but in other ways kind of uncomplicated in that regard, because he, his work and what he did and what he stood for was important to him. And that was his own sort of moral compass. That was his North Star. And so that was, those are all descriptors. You can't really play that, but that was kind of, those were the things, like his sense of values are sort of what I connected to. And that, hopefully came through. Also, obviously, the relationship with he and Commander Shepard was very important, whether that's male or male-female, and particularly as it got more intimate, in some of that play, there was a great deal of sort of emotion, and what they did was they were able to kind of use this kind of a military class system, and the understatedness of it, that you could then, through subtext, know what was going on, what was actually being said, and what was actually being felt, sometimes often being two different things, and that created kind of a wonderful sense of kind of juxtaposition. Again, I think wonderful to play in the writing, and again, what we all crave for, which is great writing. I've done video games where I've screamed and screamed and screamed, and you blow your voice out, and it's just all about, get down, fire, run, and there were days that we had some of that. They would usually sort of wait to do those sort of at the end of a session, because invariably your voice would be particularly tired at the end of that. But it clearly wasn't all that. And this character, Kaden was someone who, I don't know, just his own interior sense of moral compass is kind of what I connected to, and what I enjoyed, just felt like hand in glove. It just felt like something that I could
it resonated with, kind of.
Resonated with me. Yeah.
I can imagine there'd be quite a difference as well. Like, just from what you've said, like the difference I'd imagine between, like, you played Scorch, didn't you? You did the voice of Scorch in Republic Commando. I can just imagine there's quite a difference between doing some voice acting for Scorch and like firefights and missions and whatever, and then you compare it to someone like Kaden, and you've got like an intimate scene with Commander Shepard or something, and you've got to speak as if you're intimate and you're close with this person. You think, what kind of game is this? I imagine there's quite, well, from what you said, there's probably quite a difference there.
Yeah, and I've played some squirrely characters as well, and some terrible, it's, look, again, this is the joy of what we get to do, is that we get to kind of have a range of things that we can kind of explore. These are all the kind of the different crayons in your crayon box, the different colors. But this, kind of romantic lead that really really spoke intimately, at the most intimate moments. Those scenes were just wonderful to play, and again, that was because of the writing, that made it, so lovely, and then what I so in Mass Effect 2, obviously the character wasn't around a lot, and so that's when a fan wrote in and basically said, what about the letter, and so I read the letter, and posted it sort of on my literally did it on my iPhone and posted it, and it hit a nerve, which was really lovely, and it seemed to kind of it's played. I went back and listened to it recently, and it actually held up. But it's there's something about the heartbreak and the emotion of it. Yeah. Anyway, the writing is always, without the writing, it's very hard to get there. But they gave us a great launching pad.
Seth Green once said that he was allowed to ad-lib some of his dialogue. I was just wondering if you ever had the same, if you were allowed to do the same.
Seth Green, because he's got such a great comic and improv background, it would make sense that he would do that. And they might have even encouraged that with some of the, some of what he did. Occasionally we would come up with some ideas, and I would say, what about this? And particularly as we all kind of, as we began to really, as I really knew my character, right? As Kaden, it's like you put a suit on and it becomes you, right? In a way. So I wasn't reaching for him. Once I knew who he was, I would throw out some alts, but generally, because we come in as kind of, look, it takes 2 or 3 years to make these games, right? So, and that's hundreds and hundreds of people working to kind of create, the landscapes and the thing that then the actor comes in and kind of gives it life. Within that, it becomes harder and harder to be able to kind of just sort of throw out a lot of stuff because, or so much work has sort of gone into kind of, getting you to the moment where you can actually do what you're going to do.
Are you, would you say that you're a gamer yourself, or is it kind of more of just your playground for creativity?
I've played the game a bit and I love it, but I'm not I wouldn't identify myself as a gamer. Mark Muir is a tremendous gamer, and whenever I get onto a panel with him and they're gamer specific game related questions, I'm always relieved that he's there because he's so knowledgeable. He's really kind of like, he's like the he's got the kung fu and he's able to talk about it in such a clear way. I love the game and I've played some games, but I'm not a gamer, but I love being a part of the community. It's such a privilege.
I was going to say, who survives the Veermeyer mission?
Oh, in Vermeer. Mark basically came out and admitted that that he didn't pick Kaden, which we laugh about. As much as I like Raphael, I have to admit that he went the other way. But she's cute, and I get it. I get it. And it's so funny because there are people that I've met, so many people who come up and literally, when I'm at a con or something, they come up and they literally sort of say, "It's so nice to meet you," and they literally they apologize, "I'm so sorry I killed you," and I it's really okay. I don't take it personally, and it's one of those things where enjoy your play. The magic of this game is you can do it. You can come at it from so many different points of view. So it's really it's something, it's a personal journey, and I'm happy that makes you happy.
I almost snuck into trying to get you to do a soundbite saying that I'm Raphael Sbarge, Kaidan Alenko, the true Vermeer survivor. Because I think what you bring to the table in Mass Effect, just you and Kimberly brings such a great sense of replayability to the franchise and to the community and just to the experience.
I'm so glad. Thank you. Yeah, I admire Kimberly so much. She's also one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. So she's, if you have the privilege or the opportunity to talk to her, she's just delightful and sweet and fabulously talented. And yeah, so once I did the letter, then I contacted her, and then I said, "Hey, why don't you do the letter too?" So we both did the letter. So and then again, let's put it out. It is such an honor to be a part of this game, and it's such a distinct privilege to be in the community there's so much love for each other, that is, as relates to kind of like looking after one another in the Mass Effect community, and enthusiasm and bonding, and I've been sort of invited into that in a way, not directly as a gamer, obviously, but as someone who is, you know, a part of the making of the game, and a small part of a very big landscape, and I, you know, it is such, I mean, I'm just so honored, honestly, every day. You know, I don't take it lightly, I guess I want to say, and I'm you know, whether you kill me or not, I'm still really, you know, the happy part is that I get to be a part of this. So that's what makes me really, you know, delighted.
Did you find that there were specific challenges to working with audio feedback, like as opposed to working with another actor face to face?
I mean, I guess it's sort of, you know, I don't know, something's popped into my head. I mean, if you're used to being on a motorboat and then you have to sort of get in a kayak, it's just a different way of getting across the water. You know, it's not, it has its own kind of magic and majesty. In a way, the thing about it is that it comes together after the fact. So, you know, when you do a scene on stage or on film, you know, you feel it as you're doing it, and it's captured from multiple different angles and different takes, and then it's assembled by the editor in that regard. But in my case, in the case of working with in a video game, we are providing kind of the elements for the meal that gets kind of created, as it were. So it's in some ways you don't get this sort of satisfaction of it, kind of you know, doing it together. But again, as I said earlier, it has its own wonderful sort of unique opportunities for certain levels of subtlety that you don't get when, you know, when you're dealing with lots of, you know, all the physical aspects of being either in front of an audience or, you know, having to deal with kind of the clumsiness of doors and props and guns and actual, you know, stuff. You can really just kind of put all your energy into kind of, in a way, what you're saying and, or, you know, what you're talking about or what's happening to you. There's an immediacy in it that's sort of exciting.
Were there any storylines that you wanted to do as Kaden that you wished you could have done?
You know, let me say this. One of the things that I was so proud to be a part of was the fact is that Bioware was one of the first companies that actually introduced the opportunities to be able to have a relationship with a male or female relationships, as you were able to, you know, and that people who were playing the game could gender role play. So I you know, I've had some really profound conversations with people who said that they sort of defined their sense of who they are and their sexuality by virtue of them being able to really explore the gender roles in this game. I met someone who wrote his doctorate basically on the gender role play of Mass Effect and how important it was. They were trans and they had found their really in a world that at the time that wasn't as kind of easily as fluid as it is now, although it's, you know, there's still room for improvement, but it's more fluid than it was, and certainly more levels of acceptance and engagement. At the time when the game came out, it was profound in terms of its helping shift kind of a language and an understanding and an acceptance of us as perhaps as less defined by gender in that regard, you know, he, she, and, you know, allowing us to kind of explore that. You know, this was, I don't know if it was the first, you know, I'm sure there are people that have been able to sort of do studies about this and or can actually sort of cite this, but I believe that Mass Effect and or Bioware were the first or one of the first to kind of really, you know, engage it, particularly in a big way. And I'm again very proud to be having been a part of that, because I you know, that was an important sort of thing that I think, you know, the way in which movies and or the way artists can really shift the conversation, the way you know, the way a musician can write a song or a painter can sort of, you know, create something, or, you know, an image that locates an idea, or really perhaps, you know, gets us to think differently, that, you know, by virtue of how that artistic experience then impacts us and opens something in us. This is what, you know, artists provide. For me, you know, you hear that song and it somehow just captures something, and you find yourself wiping away tears, and it suddenly you feel heard or understand, or your emotional self gets touched in the deepest part of you. You know, those things become such gifts. So I, you know, it's interesting to me because you know, again, having been to many cons and met many fans, I've seen so many tattoos, you know, N7 tattoos, or actual, you know, incredible portraits of Kaden or Shepard or any number, you know, and it has this, you know, you go like, wow, tattoos are forever, you know. I'm thinking, and they're like, yeah, this is, and that's where you go like, well, this is more than a game. This is not a game. This is a life-defining experience. And again and again and again, how extraordinary. The other thing that was interesting. I'm sorry, I'm just sort of riffing on your question. I'm just sort of going a little bit everywhere, but someone had said, and this was, you know, above my pay grade. It was a journalist, I believe, who I read this, but he had said that Mass Effect was to games what Star Wars was to movies. That there was all the games up until Mass Effect, and it was sort of a definer in a way of the landscape. And then there are all the games after Mass Effect that then essentially have been influenced by the kind of the nuclear blast of what is or was Mass Effect, and how exciting is that as well?
I mean, elements of the storytelling as well must have, because I mean, like Star Wars was inspired by a lot of classic sort of stories being told, and kind of became an amalgamation of different stories to create something so groundbreaking. Right. I mean, surely, like in terms of Mass Effect as well, like even Knights of the Old Republic, the Star Wars project that you worked on, which obviously Bioware also worked on, like imagine part of the storytelling there would have like fed into what made Mass Effect great as well.
Yeah. I mean, again, there are people far smarter than me that would be able to kind of really reference that as relates to kind of, you know, the history and the genesis of this. But I am aware of the fact is that the kind of the impact of the characters and the impact of these stories has, you know, touched so many people. You know, and then there are things anecdotally, like I remember getting kind of someone wrote me and said, you know, told a story about how they had gone through a very terrible experience of their son dying, and she wrote me and said that, you know, Mass Effect was the way in which she was able to actually really step into a world away from her grief. It was another existence that she was able to step into, and in so doing was able to it helped her walk through essentially you know, this terrible experience. And then, you know, alternately there are all these, you know, very steamy you know, Kaidan Alenko YouTube videos that I watch and blush. and you know, some very you know, kind of rock and roll things kind of, you know, happen, and I, you know, people saying that they, you know, would run to the gas station and listen, you know, to this or that in their car. You know, it was like they're having an affair with Kaden, and you know, it's great. I mean, that's great. I'm so happy, you know, that it tickled them in that way. And again, that's such a cool thing to be part of.
In regards to the Star Wars, obviously, I don't think that the remake's going ahead anymore. Was you going to be reprising your role? Were you allowed to say that, or?
I was on under an NDA, but now that I was going to do it, and I can't tell you how sad I am that
I like
I,
Carth.
I got the call. I was like, oh, what a bummer. So many people were so excited about that, and I was so excited to be able to say something about it. But it, I don't know what happened. They were under development for 12 years or something crazy. So clearly, a lot of really astoundingly smart and well-financed people had a chance to try and make this work. I don't know what happened. Maybe there'll be an opportunity for another company to pick it up.
I should imagine so. It's a big franchise, and it's a big story as well. So very popular.
Yeah, and again, there's so many fans of that. I mean, so many fans of Carth, and I also love doing that game. So I mean, it would be really wonderful if that came back. But it was a sad day for all of us when that came down.
Are you a Star Wars fan yourself? Was it kind of a...
Yeah, I loved Star Wars. Yeah. I'm like, 100%. Yeah.
So I bet that was an experience. Like,
so thrilling. Thrilling. I was a Star Trek fan, and then when I got to be on Voyager and able to go walk, I mean, I was a fan of the original Star Trek, with William Shatner and not anymore. But I being able to touch into these things that kind of reminded me of I don't know, some part of the best part of my childhood in a way. The really fun things. It was really exciting to be a part of.
If this is kind of a weird question, but feel free to take in any direction you wish. If someone had never saved Kaden in a playthrough, what would you say to them to give him a chance?
What would I say to them? I wholeheartedly, I am an advocate of, enjoy your playthrough, as it were, what makes you happy. Let me sidestep and say, one of the interesting things about that, again, in terms of the storytelling, in terms of what Bioware did, and I think this is powerful, and again, I think, which is what bonds people to this game, is that when you realize that you make that choice, and the kind of the profoundness of the implications of what you've chosen in that moment, there's kind of an immediacy of it that kind of gives it like a, whew, okay, like I guess I'm going in that direction, and that is, I think that's what gives it. Again, we feel the power of our choices. We feel kind of the weight of them, as it were, and that's then what also then ties back to this kind of sense of kind of like how we're like hooked in, man, like dialed in, and this sort of sense of like, oh wow, this is life and death. This is these things matter, and depending on how I go, it's going to give it this sort of, it gives everything, I think, a freights, as it were, everything with a sense of kind of, I really have to think about what I'm doing here, because it's going to, like, my entire life in this game is going to be affected by this choice. To take the bait, basically, then I would say to anyone who hasn't explored, the other choice, is to say, consider the road less traveled. Take a swing and see where it takes you. I love Kimberly, and I have nothing to say but good things about Kimberly. So, and I know she feels the same. But this is the amazing thing about this game, is there's 1,001 different ways in which you can approach it. So, Kaden's waiting there for you. Should you decide to accept this mission. Yeah.
Fabulous. Are you currently working on any projects you're allowed to talk about? I know you've got Only in Theatres that's out now. It's really hard to try and find in the UK at the minute.
Yeah, good news is that we've just gotten foreign distribution, so I'm going to have a lot more to say about that. In terms of kind of it will literally, like we just a couple of weeks ago. So that will begin to have foreign distribution. That is, non-American distribution, as it were. I'm excited about that. Basically, if anyone is interested, I mean, it's a documentary about a family business, a third generation family business with these amazing ties to the origins of Hollywood, and this family business runs a movie theater and a neighborhood movie theater that's had sort of this outsized influence. It's a kind of a timely sort of telling of kind of where we are and where we're going with movie theaters for those of us who love going to the movie theaters, which I do, and kind of the ability to kind of step out of our world and have a place where we're uninterrupted and can fall into a screen that's larger than us and kind of take us away. It really is a movie about the joy of going to the movies. Onlyintheaters.com is kind of the website, which will have updates. We have I'm very excited to be able to come across the pond and elsewhere to find you, in the coming months. I look forward to that. There's, we are on strike, actors and writers on strike. It is a devastating time for many of us because it's so endless. A small thing I just want to say about that is that, for anyone who thinks about it, the Meryl Streeps and the Julia Roberts of the world are paid very, very well. And they're paid well because they command those audiences. For many of us who are middle-class actors, who are not those kinds of stars, but who have the privilege and the opportunity to work in games like Mass Effect or, other things, the strike is really about that, and many people are hurting, and yet there's still a determination to kind of try and see it through because it feels like the right thing to do. The writers and the actors are hoping that this gets resolved soon because people are some people are in a very bad way, but I'm I'm limited in terms of what I want to say, but you can look me up and there's some things coming that I'm excited about, but unfortunately I'm unable to kind of say it.
Understandable.
Bit of my hand. So yeah. That said, I hope we all get back soon.
I just hope that like you say, the writers and the actors strikes are resolved and people get what they deserve. Really, they get,
Yeah, we support you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
They get their due.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you ever so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. The time's gone super quick.
No, that's great. I mean, if anyone wants, I'm on Twitter X for at least a little bit longer. Who knows when that implodes? But at least for the time being, I'm there. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere if people want to find me and Cameo. But basically, again, just to the Mass Effect fans, just thank you for always this incredible welcome that you extend to me, and for the love that we all get to share because of the love of this game and the love of these characters. And it's really such a joy and a constant privilege to be a part of this community. Yeah. All right. Cheers, guys. Thanks so much.